Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gray Matter. I want to give a special welcome to those of you who are new viewers watching on Daystar. You could probably tell from my t-shirt what the substance of today's conversation is going to be. It's hard to believe that it's been about 6 months since we lost Charlie Kirk, but the importance of his work and the relevance of it has just grown since then. So we thought it would be a great idea to have someone on the show who not only knew Charlie Kirk, but who actually has written a book about Charlie Kirk and especially about Charlie Kirk's work. And that's our good friend, all around good guy, Drew Allen, who's a publicist, an author, a podcaster, and I'm sure many more hats than one head can wear. Great to see you again, Drew, and congratulations on the great new book. I read it and really loved it.
Hey, thank you. That means a lot. I've been looking forward to talking to you about, this subject, obviously, which was personal for me, and many people in this country, millions, it was personal. And just to talk about the country and the world.
Yeah. The book is called For Christ and Country, The Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. I watched a wonderful interview that you did with Naomi Wolf on this topic and was really intrigued. I think you have a unique perspective on Charlie Kirk and his life, and we're going to dive in and talk about that. But before we go there, as we always would do, we've got a few framing aphorisms. Charlie Kirk might have been one of the most quotable people who has lived in recent times. I think he's right up there with Thomas Sowell and maybe Dr. Jordan Peterson. But he said this. He said, "To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable, because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you." That's one of the best statements of Christianity that I could find anywhere, really. He also said, and this was really revealed after he died, but he said in 2016, you can tell a lot about a person by how they react when someone dies. Eric Metaxas, who's been on the show, a wonderful author, he said Charlie Kirk is the American Bonhoeffer. I rejoice that this book tells his story and will cause his life to continue to touch millions. There, he's talking about Drew's book. And then finally, one more from Hilaire Belloc. He says that this is what forgetting Christianity does to a civilization. He says the modern world imagines that it has outgrown religion. It has done nothing of the kind. It has merely forgotten it. And because it has forgotten it, it no longer understands itself. Men do not realize that the whole framework of their moral judgments, their political habits, and even their intellectual methods were formed within a Christian society and cannot exist long outside of it. When that framework breaks, they will not find themselves enlightened, but bewildered, not free, but enslaved, not rational, but confused. I think that really, in a large way, encapsulates the work of Charlie Kirk and TPUSA. Well, who do we have on the show today? As I said, Drew Allen is the VP of Client Development at Publius PR, a premier communications firm which represented the late Charlie Kirk. Allen has worked as a publicist for many of the biggest names in politics: Peter Navarro, Dr. Naomi Wolf, which we mentioned, Dr. Ben Carson, Alan Dershowitz, and Carrie Lake, just to name a few. But he does more of that. In addition to running PR campaigns for some of these recognizable names, he's also a widely published columnist, an in-demand political analyst on radio and TV, and host of his own popular Drew Allen podcast. And he's also written two books. We're going to talk about both of them here, but in particular, we're going to talk about his new book that deals with not only Charlie Kirk. It's not a biography, as he would say. It's really dealing more deeply with the impact of Charlie Kirk and his work. Is that a fair statement of the focus of the book, Drew? Or how would you describe this book, which I understand you've had a hard time getting out to the public? You've had some resistance with this particular publication.
Yeah, apparently it's very controversial, and Amazon has kind of relentlessly censored the book. It's available as of right now, I think. It's available other places too. But anyway, yeah, they keep shutting it down. It's happened. I've lost track of how many times. But the book is it's a very serious book. It's very personal. It's about my own transformation in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination, what I went through on a personal level, how it challenged me, how it made me a different person. I've told people on several shows that the effect of his assassination on me is that there's Drew Allen before Charlie Kirk died, and there's the Drew Allen that's sitting here right now talking to you, which is the Drew Allen after Charlie Kirk died. And the main differences are that, one, it forced me to become a better husband, a better father. Um, in a strange way, his gruesome, horrific death that we could all see in front of our faces on video, it actually didn't instill fear in me. It made the residual fear that I held about condemnation of man or attacks from other people. It actually got rid of it all. And I became more convicted. And that conviction came from the realization that I wasn't putting my faith first. That if in fact
Mm,
I wanted to achieve and become the person that I wanted to be, a person more like Charlie that was fearless, a
mhm,
fearless champion of the truth, that was, think about this. I mean, it's a guy who was eager to debate
yeah,
opponents, people who disagreed with him. He was
mhm,
eager to go into hostile environments. Most people do not want to do that. Um, and the reason he was able to do that, I understood, is because of his own transformation in life to, put his Christian faith first.
mhm,
And so I began doing that. And this book is an autopsy, if you will, of the circumstances in the United States, the spiritual and cultural decay that led us to this culmination where a conservative truth teller could be gunned down at a university, and then the left could celebrate that death afterwards. Back to your point about
yeah.
Charlie's quote, you can learn a lot about who someone is by how they react to his death, and overwhelmingly people rejoiced that he was dead.
Yeah, this was really revolting. In fact, one of the most famous ones was, of course, Jimmy Kimmel, which got him briefly taken off air, not long enough. Here in Canada, there was a law professor who was put on leave amid review of online comments after Charlie Kirk's death. Really, really disgusting displays of hatred, which, the kind of hatred that Charlie Kirk talked about, and that really he was out there trying to face head on with Christian love. One of the ones that bothered me a lot, though, and I want to get your take on this, Drew, is this sort of false remorse, the fake remorse from, for example, from Southern Poverty Law Center, who posted, "Violence is never the answer. We condemn the shooting of Charlie Kirk and all violence in any form. Our history shows violence only fuels division, and justice requires peace." Well, anybody who's awake knows what Southern Poverty Law Center is really about. What do you think about that? This sort of is that even worse than the stuff that people like Jimmy Kimmel say when they pretend to have respect, sort of post-mortem, for Charlie Kirk, and how do you feel about that?
Well, I feel outraged because the Southern Poverty Law Center and other left wing groups designated TPUSA basically a terrorist organization,
Right.
a hate
Yeah.
group. A hate
Yeah.
group at a minimum is what they called it. And the same people that claimed incessantly, like the Southern Poverty Law Center, that his words were violence, had no problem looking the other way and or celebrating when an actual act of violence claimed his life,
Right.
and they dehumanized him, just like they
Mhm.
dehumanized
Mhm.
Trump. They dehumanize me, MAGA. Starting with Hillary Clinton in 2016, saying half of Trump's supporters belonged in the basket of deplorables.
Mhm.
That should have The response from the media and the donors in the room that heard her say that should have been, this is too far. What's going on? Like, we didn't used to talk about our fellow citizens this way, but instead they escalated. Then
Yeah.
it became Nazis and fascists, etc.
Mhm.
And the realization I've had too in the aftermath of this is that this is not a political war. This is a spiritual war. And
Mhm.
if we're going to save Western civilization, obviously am focused mainly on the United States of America, but you can apply it to the West, which has a
Right.
similar shared background,
Mhm.
which is Christianity, by the way.
Mhm.
Um, it's not going to come from politics. It's going to come from the churches, from Christians.
Mhm.
And it was astonishing to me to realize that there are over 200 million Americans who claim to be Christian in this country, and yet I'm living in a culture that is like Sodom and Gomorrah. You can
Yeah.
watch the Grammys. You can watch,
Mhm.
what's going on in Minneapolis. You can, the whole left's platform around the world, but in the U.S., I mean, it doesn't matter what the issue is related to immigration, whether it's related to transgenderism. Their focus on the innocent, the kids,
Yeah.
their radical positions on abortion. All of it is fundamentally at odds with Scripture. But you
Mhm.
have a lot of demonic people out there. There's a kid out of Texas that's named James Tallarico. Um, he's been on these podcasts talking about his version of Christianity, which of course is not Christianity at all. So
Yeah,
you've
I've
got a
seen
false
those.
doctrine out there driving
Yeah.
all of this. And
Yeah.
back to your original question about Southern Poverty Law Center and their claims,
Mhm.
they're the ones who are inciting this violence. And we need to wake up and have the courage in America to acknowledge the threat in the room because, I have a chapter in the book called 9/10 is the new 9/11. And
Yeah.
that's not to diminish 9/11, but it's to draw attention to the fact that there are identical circumstances with these ideologies, whether it's leftism here or if it's
Mhm.
radical jihadism abroad. Muslims were celebrating the streets in the Middle East and Pakistan after 9/11. Well,
Mhm.
here they were celebrating the streets in America after Charlie Kirk's death.
Mhm. Mhm. A couple of the themes come through in the book. One is that Charlie Kirk's death is a cautionary tale. That comes through. But what comes through even more clearly, and I'm sure you attended this, is it's a call to action. It's a wake-up call. It's trying to do the same thing that TPUSA did. And I see TPUSA as a ministry. I think that if Billy Graham had lived in our times, he probably would have done a lot of the things that Charlie Kirk did, like going to universities. It's just that, Billy Graham, when he was out spreading the gospel, he did it in tents and public theaters because that's what was available. But I see Charlie Kirk sort of as someone in that vein, in that vocation, and that message comes through as well. One of the things you talked about Charlie sort of going into the lion's den of these American campuses, and my son is attending university and on one of these campuses that's pretty left leaning, Arizona State University. But one of the things that is really remarkable about Charlie Kirk and his engagement with students, and I want to get your take on this, is when you compare him to someone like, say, Ben Shapiro, who I don't want to disparage. He's a brilliant guy and very successful, but Ben Shapiro sort of takes these students apart and oftentimes embarrasses them, almost like a gunfighter who takes away the other guy's gun and shoots him with it. Whereas Charlie Kirk had, I watched hundreds of these videos, and you talk about them in your book. And he had such a gift for taking apart someone's ideas without attacking them personally. And without being offensive, he could stand up for what he believed in, and it was remarkable to see, unlike people who would get into an exchange with, as I use the example of Shapiro, who'd sort of wilt away or just leave in disgust, you could see oftentimes people changing their minds right in front of you because of the way that he approached them on an idea level, and it was really a great example of Christian love. I want to get your take on that because I know this is part of one of the things that you talk about in the book that was unique and remarkable about Charlie Kirk.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. The reason he was so effective is because he did emulate Christ. He was a disciple of Christ, and he loved these people. And there are countless videos out there. He was so prolific. That's what's just so amazing is he had the foresight to have people come along and film even his earliest stuff. He thought that was important, so everything's captured. But he'd go on these campuses, and even when as he grew in, um, as his profile grew, he'd go to these campuses later on, and it was just filled with hundreds, if not thousands, on some occasions of supporters. And someone would come up bravely to the microphone who was, a Democrat or a leftist to ask him a question and get into a conversation or debate. And he respected their willingness to put themselves out there just as much as he was willing to put himself on that college campus. And even when supporters of his would boo or start to ridicule a little bit, he would always silence them, gently and say, hey, let's let this person talk. Because at the root of it for him, he believed that the foundation of this society, what was giving us our permanence and what was responsible for our rise and our ability to, exist as long or short, however you want to look at it, a time as we have, is that we could have conversations with other people. We could engage in civil debate. And he believed that if that thread were cut, we would head towards civil war again. When people stop talking to one another, that's when you have a very serious problem. And
Right.
we are in that environment right now in the United States of America. And I think that the Charlie Kirk assassination should have proved just how serious the stakes are and how dangerous of a period of time is, because Charlie Kirk was just a guy that talked to people.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that was so offensive to radicals in this country that they shut him down. And these are the same people that would suggest to you that, they're open-minded and,
Yes.
they're tolerant. But their tolerance only extends to people who will bend the knee and allow them to dominate their own thoughts and opinions. And
Right.
so, I think that we have an important moment here to understand who the left is and what they are and what they're about. And it's not an ideology that is compatible with the West or Christianity. There's a reason that the left Democrats are aligning themselves with Muslims in America, because they share a greater objective at the moment that unites them, which is to destroy this country and tear it to the ground. It's why you
Yes.
have, gays for Hamas or whatever, gays for Palestine. Like, wait, they don't
Bizarre.
allow you to be gay
Yeah.
there. So, well, but you're
It's
lying
like
because you
saying
hate
Jews
Jews or
for
whatever.
Hitler. It's
Yeah,
bizarre.
Jews for Hitler. Yeah, yeah. So,
One of the people you illustrate this point, you talk about Charlie Kirk being a proponent of true free speech being a God-given right, and one that we use in the West, especially in the United States, through the protection of the First Amendment. We use it as a way to solve problems peacefully. And you're so right. He even, I think he was quoted as saying, violence begins where debate ends. And wow, this was so vividly portrayed in this recent incident with Don Lemon going into this church. These people are praying. It's a Sunday church service like you or I would attend, and here these people roll in, and they are allegedly, and Lamont even says this. He says they're expressing their right of free speech. So they're trespassing, they're violating, federal legislation under the FACE Act. And we get into these conversations with people and they say, "We know you really shouldn't be here. This is wrong. You should really leave." And you see these mothers huddling their children out the door. But people like Don Lemon, they're convinced that they are the true representatives of free speech. They're on the ramparts defending free speech. But actually, that's a complete perversion of what free speech is all about, isn't it?
it is, and it exposes the underlying problem with leftist ideology, which is its embrace of moral relativism.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
under the FACE Act, under the Biden administration, there were pro-life protesters who did nothing more than stand inside an abortion clinic, old people who were sentenced to up to 10 years in prison.
Yeah.
Don
It's awful.
Lemon goes and interrupts a church service. This is under the same statute, the FACE Act. He goes and does the exact same thing, and when he's held accountable, he cries about how, we don't believe in free speech, or this is the persecution of journalists.
Yeah.
He was a participant, and there's plenty of video evidence of what he was involved in. He coordinated with this group. He knew what they were going to do, and he went in with them. And just because you claim to be a journalist, and because you're a liberal, and just because you have a camera in your hand, does not absolve you from the same laws that apply to the rest of American citizens. And so
Mhm.
for Don Lemon, though, it's not violating the law. He's performing a, righteous duty when he does it, because, these Christians are a bunch of horrible white people, racist, xenophobic deplorables.
Right.
And the same issue with the same abortion issue I relate to Charlie Kirk and this dehumanization and violence from the left because their understanding of human life isn't based on any objective measure. It's based on what the outcome they want is.
Hmm.
So if a liberal or any person, um, is 12 weeks, 13 weeks, doesn't matter, but pick a gestation period. If they're pregnant and they go in the doctor's office and they want to have the baby, they get the sonogram and they celebrate and post it online and talk about how they're going to have a baby. There's a baby inside. But if it's inconvenient to that person, they don't want to have the child, then they just say, well, it's just a clump of cells.
Right.
Well, Charlie Kirk was just a clump of cells to the left when they were celebrating his death. He wasn't worthy of life because, in
Right.
their minds, they are gods that don't believe in transcendent power, and therefore
Mhm.
they are the authors of morality.
Yeah. This reminds me of, I was speaking recently talking about the theologian Martin Buber, who talked about the I thou, I it synthesis, where we are meant to be in relationship of subject to subject, where we treat other people as having inherent dignity, the imago Dei. And this mirrors, this mimics our relationship with God. But the I it is this, as you say, the objectification of the other, the otherness, the dehumanization of the other. And of course, once you do that, there really isn't any atrocity imaginable that isn't possible for human beings. And it's very sad and concerning. I think the situation, Charlie's assassination, but also the situation with Don Lemon is showing that there's a lot more work to be done, the work that Charlie Kirk was doing, and I see your book as being part of that. Another example is, just this morning I was going into my local grocery store, Drew, and there was a big display up, Coca-Cola display, announcing the upcoming Olympics in Canada. And of course, right in the middle of this display, showing all of our wonderful Canadian athletes, was the rainbow flag. And so that made me think, wow, we've got a lot of work to do. But there are signs, especially in the United States, that times there are changing. I saw a story that in Texas, lawmakers are closer to mandating Bible readings in public schools. That's encouraging. And I read about a lady who is the CEO of In-N-Out Burger, who refuses to remove Bible verses from their website and their advertising, despite the backlash. Seems to me that's something that wasn't happening a whole lot before what happened with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I do think the tide has changed. And look, it doesn't take a million people to be activated and transformed in one moment. All it requires is business leaders, individuals in their communities to be transformed and, you know, and encourage and affect those people around them. And that
Mhm.
obviously can only happen though if you're willing to engage and talk and be outspoken. And man, I think about where you are in Canada, and it's like, we're not on the same path right now, and it
No.
it honestly pains me. I talk to you, and you're my brother, and love you to death. And it's like you guys. I mean, we could be if we had not elected Trump, we'd be right where you are.
Yeah.
But it's just you're our neighbors, and you're just like trapped in this. You know,
Mhm.
I mean,
But
I don't know. I guess I'm elated, encouraged by you because even at this moment in the
Thanks.
U.S., we won an election.
Yeah.
We are a majority. 66%
Yeah.
of those polled, Democrats and Independents included, support deportation. They're against illegal immigration, and so obviously, when you have those kind of stats and stuff, despite the propaganda, people become bolder, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to go against the tide. And anyway, that's just my slight nod to you, man.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate any nod from you. I also really appreciate your book. You got a wonderful, review of your book from Eric Metaxas, who, as you know, is just a brilliant author. I've read all of his books, and I mean, his biographies of Luther and Bonhoeffer are just the definitive works of on those people, and so that's pretty high praise for your book. What he says, how important your book is, Eric Metaxas said something else though. I wanted to get your take on this, and sort of shifting the conversation from Charlie Kirk specifically to the broader culture of what's going on in the U.S. as you were describing. Eric Metaxas said he was talking about what happened recently in Davos at the World Economic Forum and Trump's speech there and some of the other people in his cabinet who spoke there. And he said that what's happening in America is a second American Revolution, and that the New World Order is not the New World Order of Klaus Schwab and the one that our Prime Minister Mark Carney talks about, but actually the New World Order is America renovating itself and becoming really what it was intended to be and fulfilling its destiny. And sort of like a phoenix rising out of the ashes, because of course, a lot of countries in the world, as you know, sort of thinking that, well, the American star is really is on the decline. But under Trump, it seems like that's not the case. What do you think about what Eric Metaxas said, that what we might be seeing is the falling of the sort of post-World War II order, but that the New World Order is not going to look anything like what the globalists think it will?
No, he's right. Eric and I are pretty like-minded on a lot of these things. I think he's a much smarter person than I am, but I went on a show a couple of years ago for my last book, America's Last Stand, which obviously was trying to get people
Great
to
book, by the
rally
way.
and
Yeah.
and vote for Trump. But I went on a show, and right off the bat, I said something about made a historic comparison to that moment, 2024, that election. And I said, this is an inflection point in American history. It's as serious as, the Civil War and the
Yeah.
American Revolution. I said, this is kind of the third iteration of that in our nation's history. And he said, wow, you know what? You're the second person to say that. I was the first. I'm the only person I've ever heard, say that. And so he's right. I mean, we're really undoing all this damaging ideology because the left as we see it today, it's the worst it's ever been, but its roots are in movements that started even in the early kind of 1900s coming over here. A lot of
Mhm.
communism obviously imported from the Soviet Union. It always finds itself putting its roots down in academia, of course, and everything else.
Yeah.
And so obviously FDR's New Deal. There are a number of Democrat presidents. Woodrow Wilson is a famous example of somebody who really instigated a lot of this. And I'm doing the Trump weave here, but I promise I'm going somewhere. Uh, I,
It's
uh, I,
okay. It's an organic conversation, Drew. You go down any rabbit hole you like.
yeah. Well, so I just interviewed Newt Gingrich this morning, actually, Speaker
Oh,
Gingrich,
wow.
who's somebody that I
Speaking of
admire.
smart guys.
Smart guy. And, we were talking about, a lot of these issues. He was in Davos with the president,
Oh, was
obviously.
he? Okay.
And, this radicalism, we're seeing manifest itself right now. It's we kind of held it off a little bit until, Barack Obama became president and, he ushered in this kind of new radical era. And of course, Hillary Clinton is far more radical than Bill Clinton, her husband, ever was actually. But these people, as they took control of the education system. And that's really where these things got out of control.
Yeah.
And, to your point about Charlie, he identified it early on. He went to college campuses to the source and, tried to rescue people from that kind of insipid ideology. But
Yeah.
we have this internecine war going on in the Republican Party, which is always happening in this country.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, the kind of the rhinos, Republicans in name only, them and the Democrats, I realized after this conversation with Newt about history, what they have in common is that they're elitists. And what I mean by that is whether Republican or Democrat, these people really look down on the common man.
Yes.
And so they're all have authoritarian instincts because they don't believe in the citizen's ability for self-governance.
Yeah.
And so that's why you have Republicans and Democrats who align on these things, because fundamentally they believe they have to rule over you.
Yeah.
And that was
Which
kind
is
of my
the opposite of
takeaway.
what Charlie Kirk was all about.
And this nation,
Yeah.
our government is supposed to be subservient. I mean, the Constitution is a contract, and that
Mhm.
contract says that we, the people, are wield the power, and those in government are the servants. But what you see with the permanent bureaucracy and these politicians, of course, is that they believe in the inverse. So they have
Mhm.
violated that that contract. And anyway, but the whole New World Order and all of it is based on that authoritarian instinct, which is we have to be the central planners, right? Because Drew Allen and Leighton Grey, these guys are too stupid to wipe their own rears. So we got to figure out we got to tell them how much water they can use, and et cetera.
Yeah. Well, speaking of stupid, if you wanna know how bad things are in Canada, Drew, the Liberal Party of Canada, which is the ruling party in Canada right now, they're like our Democrats, have invited Hillary Clinton to be the keynote speaker at an upcoming convention, and then, of course, they're going to pay her or the Clinton Foundation a boatload of money to do that. But you mentioned some of the sort of the fissures that are present within the American right, and this is really fascinating. I watched recently an interview that Charlie Kirk did with Tucker Carlson. I believe it was maybe a couple of years ago. And I wondered, what would Charlie Kirk think about the things that people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are saying today? Are you shocked by this, or did you, based on your research and being involved so heavily in dealing with these people, did you see this coming? This sort of crack in the Republican movement, or I guess in the MAGA movement?
No, I didn't see it coming. I'm shocked, but as I look back at actions that I know about in the past from those individuals, in particular Candace Owens. I mean, I know people who were around her back in the day. I can tell you this: Charlie would absolutely. You don't have to be friends with Charlie to know this. Like, he would absolutely fundamentally reject everything about Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens in private. Certainly,
Yeah.
um, the anti-Semitism in particular,
Hmm.
he had no tolerance for.
Yeah.
His beef with, donors or whatever else, or his concerns about losing the PR war as it related to the war between, Hamas and Israel. Um, those didn't chip away at his affection for Israel and, his love of that country.
Hmm.
And you have to understand, too, look, there are more people out there than him that are very, very dangerous in their thinking. And the reason they're dangerous is they're just opportunists. So
Hmm. Hmm.
this is what Tucker apparently has become. This is certainly Candace. Um, they love themselves. In some cases, you can look at who's funding them. People have suggested to me strongly that in Tucker's case, it's follow the money. He's got this
Yeah.
love affair with Qatar.
Right.
Um, and so, but at the end of the day, it's, they're making money off of this stuff. I mean, look, I think that there are more people we can put in this category that are famous, that are in those groups. But what's interesting is once they were liberated, right, by being fired from wherever they worked before, from Fox News or Candace Owens from Daily Wire, now they're forced to, pay their bills on their own. So they've
Yeah.
started their own kind of companies. And so what you're seeing is they never had the kind of integrity that you thought. It really was about just saying what was going to get you a paycheck.
Mm.
And so for a long time, Tucker Carlson was somebody who when he was at his prime before he got fired, if I don't have a lot of free time. If I had to make an hour in a day to watch anything, I would turn on Tucker.
Yeah, me too.
He was
Yeah.
on fire. He was
Mhm.
amazing. And now he's saying things that aren't even close. Like, it's not even the same person.
Yeah.
And Candace Owens, she's a grifter, and she's willing to become whatever she needs to become. I mean, I think she's showing her true colors. I think she's
Yeah.
a nasty person, and she's a gaslighter. She uses the left's victim, playbook over and
Yeah.
over. She makes
Yeah.
these accusations that she can't substantiate, and when people call her out, suddenly, they're, it's sickening to me.
Yeah. It's sort of out of the Barack Obama playbook. Anytime anyone criticized him, it was always, "Oh, you're a racist. Here's your label," right?
Mhm.
One of the just coming back to the book for a moment, I don't want to gloss over this because I think it's a really important point that comes out in your book. The story of Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA is the story of it's the exemplification of what a person can do if they're guided by faith and they believe in what they're doing, and if they believe, and it really is an example of citizen-led advocacy, the right kind. And it's very empowering to the individual. It's very empowering to communities and churches, and it's a very inspiring message that tends to get people out the door. It tends to get them to places where they'll stand up and they'll protest against things that they know are wrong. Um, and I wonder, because you're telling that story, do you think that's part of the reason why your book has met with some resistance?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it could be a number of things. I think that, as Ilhan Omar said on TV shortly after Charlie Kirk died, she hoped his legacy would be left in the dustbin of history.
Yeah.
I think that people out there want to deny my assertion that he's a modern martyr.
Mhm.
I think that people are very afraid of some of the ideas in this book, which is drawing awareness to the radical left and how they resemble terrorists and terrorism.
Mhm.
And I think people are deeply fearful of a spiritual awakening that's happening in this country. Um, something that Newt said to me this morning as well. We got into talking about what's going wrong, and I said, I've been speaking to a lot more of these Republican groups out here, and the invitations seem to be coming fast and furious because I'm sharing a message. What I'm sharing with you, basically talking about Charlie and the effect and all that, it's really resonating with people. And so these people are finding me and talking about me and want me to come and speak. And I spoke last week and I told this group, I said, um, since becoming a parent, my worldview has shifted so much. I've got two young girls. They're
Mhm.
basically Charlie's kids' ages. One's
Yeah.
almost 3 and the other it just turned 1. And as a parent, you don't get time off. It's a
Yeah.
full-time job and it never ends.
Yeah.
Well, being a citizen is a responsibility that never ends either. It's 24/7. Newt put it in this phrasing. He said, "Yeah, it's how we got to this point where we reduced it to voting. It's a 24/7, 365 day a year obligation."
Mhm.
And that's the truth. And we have to be you can't wait just for elections to come around. And the sad thing is here's the thing. Even in elections, it is shocking how few people even turn out to vote in these elections that are
Yeah.
able to vote. And
Mhm.
so you still, even on a big election like the presidential election, this most recent one, I mean, you had a lot of people that showed up, but like you would think more people would want to pay attention to their country and participate by voting, and they didn't. And so
Mhm.
people really have to change their mind. One, you can't look in the mirror and ask yourself, you can't sit here and look for Superman to come and save you. You got to look
Right.
in the mirror, and Superman is staring you back in the face. And what Charlie Kirk proved to me, it was about American exceptionalism
Mhm.
because, and this is what I really hope people will take from the book is something that will change their lives, is that Charlie Kirk was not always Charlie Kirk. Okay, he
Yeah.
was a kid. He went to high school. He was passionate, uh, but he was consumed with a desire for self-improvement. And so he read
Mhm.
with just an insatiable appetite.
Yeah.
He believed in gaining knowledge. He read his Bible. He tried to deepen his faith, and he worked out like an athlete to prepare for these debates. And the thing is, if you want to have a great country, it takes work. If you want to preserve a great country, it takes a lot of work. And it's not voting, it's on yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what the calling was to me, was stop limiting yourself. Like,
Mhm.
how do I get to a place where I'm fearless like that, where I can go out and make a difference and change minds? Because if you're afraid and you don't want to be in hostile environments, well, you're limiting opportunity and you're needed in
Mhm.
those environments. And not
Right.
everyone has the same skill set. Not everyone's going to be, serving their country or, being a steward of the country they've inherited in the same way. But for me, that was it because I realized, you know what, I have, and you share these, a lot of people, I have so many of these qualities that I admire in Charlie Kirk, but what am I lacking? What is stopping me from getting to that point? And it was not putting my faith first.
That's right. That's right, and, I'm glad that you said that because, what is core to what needs to change and what is changing is, faith, and I'm reminded of, something that G.K. Chesterton wrote in a book that he wrote about 100 years ago called The Everlasting Man. He said, "Christianity has died a series of deaths, but it always comes back, and the reason why is because, our Lord and Savior overcame death. He came back from the dead. And of course, Muhammad didn't do this. Buddha didn't do this. Only Jesus did it. And so it is in our faith in Christianity that we have these series of revivals. And this is happening right now. In fact, I don't know if you saw this, Drew, but I wrote a piece for my show on the growth of faith in Christianity in Gen Z, especially, but also in millennials. And, in England and Wales, we don't hear about this. We hear about all the terrible stuff happening in England. But in England and Wales, church-going Christianity, has quadrupled in since 2018. We're not hearing about we only hear about the Muslim revival. In fact, in the Muslim world, Islam is cratering and Christianity is growing by leaps and bounds. In China, there were about 1,000,000 Christians at the turn of this century, in the year 2000. There's there's about 160,000,000 now. And so, Charlie Kirk and his message, is at the core of this, and it seems like, Gen Z is getting or at least many of them are getting the picture, and they're turning to faith because they're seeing the lies that they've been told, and they're in search of the type of meaning and truth that Charlie Kirk, talked about that was his ministry and that you also, describe in your book about him.
And look, if you are listening and you're somebody who is new to Christianity or exploring Christianity, do not let other individuals lead you astray. That Bible exists so that you can read it. You do not need an intermediary between you and Christ. Now, it's super important. One of the things I'm doing is I'm reading history and I'm reading what other, but you've got to establish a foundation for yourself before you go and live, because people will lead you astray. James Talarico will go on a podcast and tell you that Jesus supported abortion. Okay. And he'll make it
Yeah,
sound really reasonable, and he'll make it,
yeah.
these are demonic people. And
Mhm.
I don't want that to happen to people either. But
Yeah.
what I can tell people is the big change for me was I've been a Christian my whole life, and I was kind of an autopilot Christian,
Mhm,
which is
mhm.
to say I'm a believer, but I wasn't going forth and making disciples of any nations, right? I wasn't even working on myself. And seeing Charlie die for his faith made Jesus Christ's death suddenly like very real for me, because you see
Mhm.
somebody who put it on the line and did that.
It
And I was
costs the
finally,
discipleship, yeah.
yeah, and I
Yeah,
was finally able to internalize and go back 2,000 years and think about what Jesus did.
yeah.
And it just gave me the conviction that I was lacking.
Mhm. Well, the conviction is right there in your book. Folks, we've been talking with Drew Allen, who is the author of a new book. It's called For Christ and Country: The Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. It's received high praise from, well-known best-selling authors, the likes of, Naomi Wolf and Eric Metaxas, and, if you value my opinion, it's the best thing that's been written on Charlie Kirk, so far. It shouldn't surprise people that the book has been received with some degree of controversy. But Drew, I wanted to ask you about this. So, you obviously you must feel great about how your book has been praised by some best-selling authors. But how have you dealt with some of the a negative reaction to your book. How that must be troubling for you.
Well, it kind of incentivizes me and encourages me more, people that still wanna dance on Charlie Kirk's grave because this book exists. Um, the only frustrating thing to me is dealing with this behemoth of Amazon that has continually censored it, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a book that I wrote because I know that it's very important. I know that talking about these things is very important, and that's what I wanted to do, and so it's really tough to feel, powerless in terms of, using, something like I mean, people can buy it elsewhere, but,
Yeah.
that's where they get it, and so, the book would go to, like, 2,000 in the Amazon rankings, which is really good for
Yes.
Amazon,
Yeah,
and
excellent.
so it's like, "Oh, this is amazing," and then you get visibility and, people learn about the book, and then Amazon shuts the book off. Can't ship to
Wow.
anybody's address, and the next and, 2 days later, it's, 500,000 on Amazon, so whatever, this is a marathon. The ideas in this book aren't, I mean, they're timely and they're timeless.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the main thing is just that even having a conversation with you, getting you to read the book, which is such a win for me, just to internalize this stuff because, you know, I'm putting into words what I think a lot of people are feeling. And hopefully I can give people language and, to back up, to utilize.
Mhm. Well, you've certainly done that. It's a beautifully written book. Folks, it's called For Christ and Country, Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. The left killed Charlie Kirk. This is the thesis of the book, not with a single bullet, but with years of hatred, slander, and moral corruption that made his assassination inevitable. And Drew Allen argues that Charlie Kirk's death was not an isolated act of violence. We've talked about that here, but the culmination of a toxic political movement that has gone mainstream now, fully emboldened by the Democratic Party. And what Drew does really in beautiful prose is he puts the death of Charlie Kirk into context, in not only culturally but spiritually. And even if you're not a Christian, you'll come away from this book having a better understanding about what Christianity is all about, why it was so core to what Charlie Kirk was about, why his movement is so inspiring to millions and millions of people, even more so after his death. I encourage people to read this book. Also, we're adding it to our reading list. And of course, his earlier book called America's Last Stand, Will You Vote to Save or Destroy America in 2024? And of course, in that book, Charlie Kirk and others receive mention there in terms of the MAGA movement and why it was so vital to turn America away from where they were to get to where they are now and where Mr. Trump and his administration are trying to take them. So I think it would be useful. I'd be interested to hear from you about this, Drew. Um, your first book, America's Last Stand, is not just about the election. It's actually about a series of streams and themes that were going on in America at the time, and indeed in the West, and how vital that election was. And actually, many of the things that you predicted in your first book have come to pass, haven't they? So these two books almost fit together in some ways, don't they?
Yeah, I think all my writing probably ultimately does because, you know, if you base your own foundational understanding of the world um, in truth, those sacred elements that go towards creating freedom and encouraging freedom and establishing freedom in these principles, they all come from the same place.
Mhm.
And, they precede me. The founding fathers of this country were very well read. That's a big difference between those individuals and many Americans today is that they were well versed in all of the theories.
Yeah.
And they also understood, like I'll read Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, which is the left's playbook. You're seeing it in Minneapolis right now.
Mhm.
Um, it's how to foment revolution in America. It's communist.
Yeah.
And, I think it's important. Charlie would do that too. He'd read Marx and Engels, and he'd
Yeah.
quote them to students and professors who didn't even know.
Yeah.
And so that's well, what I was gonna say is, look, there's a burden on each of us that we should embrace, which is that we do have to improve ourselves if we wanna save our collective countries in the West.
Yeah.
And that burden is on us uniquely because the left, people from that ideology, they are lazy and can be lazy. They just have slogans and talking points and a bunch of things that aren't true. So it takes a lot of time to undo all of that indoctrination. And so that's why Charlie Kirk had to study so hard. That's why he had to prepare. And it's just like if I wanted to convert someone to Christianity, this is another realization I had. Before Charlie's death, I realized I really couldn't be an effective ambassador for Christ. It doesn't matter that I'm a Christian.
Mhm.
Can I actually quote scripture and explain this and articulate it to somebody and answer their questions, especially if if they're skeptical? And I couldn't. And so I went on a journey to make sure that wasn't going to happen. And the same thing's true in our countries. We've got to study and prepare for these debates and challenge ourselves because you'll get conviction from that. You know, if you believe in the truth, questioning it is only going to make it stronger and more and brighter.
Yeah, this is very true. And I've often thought about Charlie Kirk. Of course, his death is tragic, but that doesn't take away from the fact that his life is a great American story. But if Charlie Kirk's message had been secular, I think he still would have been a very effective political organizer. He still would have had some success, but because everything that he did was based in his faith and Christianity, and because his example was Jesus Christ, that makes what he did in his life and his message in TPUSA and everything that he did go beyond America and American politics to be not only an international story, but a story for all time that's going to inspire generations and generations of people. I really think that that's what we're seeing. We're seeing it in the early days. It's hard to sort of see it in perspective when we're so close to it. But there's no question that Charlie Kirk was a very key historical figure, and I think it's because of the Christian message that was most important to him, and I think comes through so eloquently in your book. But Drew, the last thing I want to do before you leave us, and I'm so grateful for the time, we would be remiss if we didn't mention your wonderful podcast, The Drew Allen Show. I listened to several episodes of this recently, and you're doing just really great stuff there. Tell us a little bit about the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it for 5 years, and it's always been kind of a hobby. I've tried to take it up a notch just in terms of attention. It's very hard to, maybe people in this audience understand you have to pay bills, and so my podcast has been something that's been. It helps me formulate ideas. It helps me communicate with people, and I can go out and give speeches a lot of places really easily because I'm used to talking a lot. And I don't typically have guests on my show. I'm changing that, so you'll have to come on soon. I think that people will enjoy that. That's why I had Nude on. I said, okay, well, I'll just let's see if Nude will come. I couldn't believe
I'm
going to
watch that episode. Yeah,
yeah. So, no, it's a great podcast, and there's so many great podcasts out there. There's like such a shortage of time out there, But I like to get behind them. I enjoy doing it. If I could do it full time and get paid like Candace Owens without selling my soul, I would do it. So maybe one day. But we're getting closer. We're growing. I want your show to keep growing too. I mean, I've been around you for a while, and it's so encouraging to see what you've done and accomplished, and you're such a nice guy. You're such a great conversationalist, and it's so easy, and not a lot of hosts have that. They're like me right now. They're very hard, but you're just like, you got that Rush Limbaugh, gentle, vibe going.
Well, I'll take any comparison to the late Rush Limbaugh. But that's very gracious of you, and it's been very gracious of you to come onto our show and to talk about your book. I hope that you can do podcasting full time someday, but it'd be a shame if you stop writing books because your books are wonderful. Folks, we've been sitting down with Drew Allen, and I just want to remind everybody that he's written a wonderful new book that just came out called For Christ and Country, The Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. It's received rave reviews from people like Naomi Wolf and Eric Metaxas, and from yours truly, although I don't stand on the same level as those people who are best-selling authors. But I do read a lot of books, and these books, Drew's books, are well worth reading. So, Drew, it's been wonderful to see you again and to hear that your family's doing so well. Of course, you're one of the tops in your field as a publicist, but it's amazing all these other things that you can do and you do so well. But I guess it's not surprising because everything that you do is guided by your faith. And I guess that's why the fruits, hey, we shall know them by their fruits. And it's been a real pleasure having you on here. Best of luck with the book and with the podcast and everything else that you're doing.
Hey, I appreciate you so much. Thanks for the time and for the platform.
All right. Thanks, Drew.
Hungry for truth beyond the television? Well, extend the conversation with Grey Matter online. Grey Matter's insights continue in your inbox. Subscribe to our Substack newsletter where we dive deeper into the spiritual battles facing Canadian families today. Equip yourself to stand firm in your faith and lead with godly wisdom. Join our growing community of truth seekers at substack.com/Grey Matter newsletter. Subscribe today and never miss the Canadian perspective on what matters most. In a world where truth is under siege, legal expert Leighton Grey's book, Lies, Laws, and Liberty, delivers the intellectual firepower you need. 17 powerful essays tackle our most pressing challenges, from free speech to family values. Don't just witness cultural upheaval, help shape what comes next. This isn't just another book, it's your roadmap to becoming a joyful warrior for truth, family, and freedom. Order on Amazon today and arm yourself with wisdom for the battles that matter most. The battle has always been over people and ideas, but they're just the targets. The real enemies are spiritual principalities and powers. Grey Matter's purpose is to reach out with the voice of Christian truth to men between 18 and 44. We believe that these sons and fathers are Christ's inheritance. Join us financially and help us to speak so Canadians hear truth that sets men free and brings families to Jesus. Contact us by email at greymatterconnect@gmail.com or mail us at Post Office Box 2436, Fort Macleod, Alberta, postal code T0L0Z0. Thank you for your support.